Hello and welcome to another episode of the Thought Leadership Podcast and live show, and where we interview the most incredible leaders, thought leaders, and experts in different fields. And today I'm here with Marcel, who is the founder of the introvertedleadership.com. Marcel, welcome on the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm so happy to have you, because what many of you who are listening and watching don't know about me is that I'm actually an introvert. I've been having a company since I was 17, and I've always been an introvert without knowing this. And this is why I'm so excited to have Marcel on to speak about this, because for many, many years, people came up to me and were saying, well, you don't seem to be an introvert, you don't seem shy. And there's so many beliefs around what the introvert is. And today we're gonna break all those beliefs with the expert on this topic, so we can all, while either if you are an introverted leader, understand more about yourself. If you're an extroverted leader, understand a bit more about us and how we function in this world. It's really exciting. So Marcel, thank you for taking the time for being here with me. And thank you for sharing all your amazing knowledge about this topic. So before we start, I would love you to just share a bit about yourself. Who is Marcel? Who are you?
Yeah, of course. So I currently help introverted leaders to become better at making new connections. And I'm an introvert myself, and I learned how to do this. I organized in recent years networking events for digital nomads in Buenos Aires, in Amsterdam, in Mexico, in the United States. I created a network that is the foundation of my seven-figure business that I founded a couple of years ago. And I'm now at a point that I want to help other introverted leaders to become better at building networks as well.
Amazing. Amazing. And you mentioned that you have a highly successful business. And that's the thing, when it comes to being an introverted leader, sometimes we might be afraid of, like, if I don't network, if I don't go out there, if I'm not doing everything, and if I'm not showing up and, and actually taking the time to recover and taking time out for myself, I cannot have a successful business. But as you mentioned yourself, you had a successful company, a seven-figure business, being more and more who you are and actually acting in your genius, acting in your energy levels when it comes to what you need. So I really want to hear about if it's always been like this. When you started your company, and you clearly have been an entrepreneur for many years, was there a moment when you were not so aware of being an introverted leader, and how did you manage, and how did you go through life at that point?
Yeah, so it has been a big learning process, actually. I would say, yeah, making new connections, especially when it comes to moving to a whole new place and building a network there, that has been really difficult for me. To give an example, yeah, one thing I remember is being on a plane home from the United States back to the Netherlands. And before that, I had spent 2 months in Austin, Texas. And I'm a digital nomad. So I was like, okay, I'm going to live there for 2 months. And I want to see if I can build a community, make new connections, make friends to do fun things with, business connections, etc., etc. And I really started with that intention. And in the plane back to Amsterdam, I realized, okay, I haven't made those connections. It didn't work. And it wasn't the first time this happened. Like, also in the Netherlands, I've moved to a new city. I had gone to other places before with the goal of making new connections. It also hadn't worked. So that was the point where I was like, okay, it's not the places I go to, it's me. I am not good at making new connections, and I need to change, or I'll never be able to do that.
Yeah. And what you're mentioning about, like, Austin being one of those hubs in the world for business development, and going to those cities and really having, and I can imagine how hard it must have been, feeling the frustration of wanting to be there, wanting to interact, and not being able to do that. So you mentioned that you came back to Europe, and you came back and had that realization that it was not external external circumstances that could really change, but really the internal circumstances that could change how you would either network or build your business more in alignment. But what was it that was stopping you? If you can remember that time, like what was it that made you not being able to make that networking when you were in Austin or other places where you left as a nomad? Can you share a bit more about the tries or the errors, and let's say the failures or the things that wasn't working at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So to use Austin as the example, before, like when I came there, I instantly signed up to the most popular co-working space in town. Like I was like, okay, that's my people. Maybe nomads as well, but at least people work on their business, inspiration, you name it. So I joined that co-working space, and the goal, of course, was to network, to make new connections. But then I started going there, and it was this big communal table, and then I kind of forgot that I was there to make new connections. I wanted to get work done, and everything was distracting to me. There were people talking, asking about how one's weekend went, and like getting food and walking around, and a lot of distractions. So I was like, okay, this is not going to be productive for me. And I started changing my schedule. I started working from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. at the co-working space when there was no one around. And at 9 a.m., when people started showing up, I would move to just a cafe to like there would still be people talking. It would be more like white noise and no pressure to socialize. And I would maybe go for lunch, go for a walk, do some more reading, like do my own thing all by myself, then have some dinner. And for me, it would be the absolute perfect day. And then in the evening, I would be like, okay, I would like to have a drink with a couple of friends now. And that was the moment that I remembered, oh, wait, I have no friends. I forgot, because I'm so happy to spend the day by myself. I forgot to make an effort to make that network.
Yeah. Yeah, the co-working, what you're mentioning about co-working, I can so relate to that, going into a co-working space and feeling like it's great when you don't know anybody. When you go to a co-working space or cafe and you just like, you feel that people are around you and they're moving, they're doing their thing, it can give you creativity. But when you start to get to know people in the co-working space, that social pressure of politely replying, they're asking you questions, and every time you kind of disrupted, someone comes in that you feel like you look up, you need to say hi to them. I can so relate to that, and I think many of our listeners who are introverted can also relate to this feeling of social pressure. But at the same time, like what you're talking about is this, how do you balance then? Because as an entrepreneur and as a founder, a big role of what you do is actually networking, creating opportunities for your company, being out there and creating partnerships, creating, insights, all these kind of things. So how do you then do this? If you know that you are more than happy to spend your day alone, working on stuff at home or in the cafe, and you also have, because being an introvert doesn't mean that you don't want to have social interaction, it's just that you might want to do it in another way than the whole day. How did you switch that? How did you go from the previous not knowing what to do and actually creating that in your life?
Yeah, so after that, like with a couple of more events, like at some point I came to the realization, I don't want to network by hanging out with people the whole day. So no co-working, no events that require me to be somewhere the whole day. I want, and that's true for many introverts, like you have limited time you would love to interact with people, and the rest of the time you might want to be alone or with friends or like a small group of people, So because the time of interacting with new people is, the amount of time is smaller, you need to make it more effective.
Yeah.
And for me, the way to do that is by being an organizer of events and being a leader.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'll just so I'll give, let's say, a recent example. Early this year, I went to Playa del Carmen in Mexico, and I didn't know anyone. And I would like to make connections there. So I was like, okay, how can I do that? I don't necessarily want to join a co-working or there is a community there. So you'll get a lot of invites for both parties, pool parties, to join for co-working at someone's house. But I know that's not for me. My energy is drained, and I would only go with the goal to make quickly new connections and then leave and maybe meet the person I feel most connected with for dinner later. So the way to still make the connections for me was to start organizing events. So I started organizing digital nomad meetups. So I did it weekly, and I would promote it all over the place, and it grew over time. And the big advantage is, if you organize the event, you can choose the time, you can choose the date, you can choose the location, and you get to speak with almost everyone who attends the event. And as a participant, that wouldn't happen to me. I would often get stuck in a conversation, and I would maybe only meet like 2 or 3 people, and the conversation wasn't even necessarily that great, and it wouldn't be a good connection for the future. So by being the organizer, I would be able to quickly chat with a lot of people, and actually that's the way I have made connections with people I meet all over the world now.
Brilliant. I love how you are creating, like, basically what you mentioned was that when you're in the co-working space and when you are in those events, it's a lot of quote unquote random moments when it's not very curated or intentional of now it's the time we're going to be together. However, if you choose to be the organizer and as a founder, leader of a company, also becoming a community leader, event organizer, can be as small as organizing a dinner, it doesn't have to be a meetup, but organizing yourself, the context, the curation, how many people, when and how, you are managing your own energy so much better, because you can put it in the time that you know, if you know that in the morning you're working and better alone, then you can put it in the afternoon or vice versa, and you can create an opportunity to create a network that actually knows you. And I love what you mentioned about this. You usually have a couple of people that you meet, maybe 2 or 3 people in an event. And I'm the same. When I go to an event, the problem is that I go deep over broad. So I might end up speaking with 2 or 3 people in a networking event, a really good conversation, but I kind of miss out on all the other people because that's how my energy is managed. Whereas an extrovert might speak with so many more and have 10, 20 new connections more on like, let's say, superficial level, but it allows them to actually build their network faster. So I love the fact that you mentioned that if you do it yourself and you organize them themselves, you actually get to connect with more people at the same time, more than 2 or 3 people if you will go to an event. So that's really great advice. I would love you to share a bit more about, so that one is about really networking and how you can start to create that more networking when you come to new cities or new countries, let's say, as a nomad, but also as an entrepreneur when you want to network more. Is there any other shift that you have done since you really went into becoming an expert on introverted leadership? What are the big shifts that you made yourself in your own leadership, in your own way of managing your energy in order to create more success in your business and your life?
Actually, I heard you say also one thing I also wanted to get back to, because it might be valuable for someone who's listening. That was about, it can be as simple as organizing a dinner. And this was what was happening to me all the time. Like, what happens, you hang out all the time during a co-working or a beach day or whatever. And then plans are made.
Yeah.
And if you're not there, you're not invited.
Yeah.
So, and that is not so much fun. And as an introvert, you would have to either sacrifice your entire day doing something you don't love and drains your energy to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And you can take control of that by being the organizer, by organizing the dinner and choosing the location and the time and inviting the specific people you would love to catch up with, and who you think would be also mutually good connections, because sometimes you don't talk with everyone.
Absolutely.
So that's so easy. If you're currently feel like you're missing out, you're never invited to things, well, I think the biggest shift you can make is just by deciding to organize what you would love to be invited to.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Great. And is there something else that you could give us an advice for when it comes to introverted leadership? Big shift that you have experienced.
Well, it's just also the realization that I am an introvert. I didn't know that. And throughout the years, I've heard the word introvert many times, but I was always like, okay, even if I associated it with being shy, like you mentioned before. Yeah. And I was like, even if I am that, I don't want to be that. So I don't even want to look at the meaning of that word. Yeah. So I just ignored it. But then I understood, okay, it means that I prefer to have a lot of alone time and inner reflection, and interactions with other people drain energy more easily for me than for many extroverted people. So just that realization, hey, I'm an introvert, that was a massive shift.
And when you have, let's say you meet other introverted leaders that you either have in your community, or you meet them when you travel around the world, what are the most common tendencies that they realize about themselves early on in the process? You mentioned, for instance, that you need more time alone, or being with people might be more energy draining. Can you give a couple of more examples of, I guess there's always different for every person, but a couple of things that you see often that introverted leaders are experiencing?
Yeah. One example is not trying to be an average extrovert, but embracing the fact that you're an introvert and becoming a really good introvert. And what I mean is that if you're introvert, like a lot of the world is optimized for extroverts, and a lot of the people around you are extroverts. So you might have a tendency to play along and play a game that you don't enjoy playing and can never win. So the big thing is knowing that you're an introvert, accepting that, and using the powers of that, which means making the most out of your limited interaction time, and also being better at like preparation. For example, introverts are really good at in silence preparing things and making things happen, and also follow up. So yeah.
And how can, if someone is listening, they're not sure if they are an introverted leader, how can they know if they are that?
Yeah, there are like a dozen different checklists, and they're all a little bit different. For me, when I just heard the sentence, introverts mostly recharge by being alone and extroverts recharge by interacting with people, I instantly knew.
Yeah. Can you give a couple of more examples of how you can know if you're an introverted leader?
Yeah, so one symptom might be that you get irritable when you're around people for too long. even if you don't notice that your energy is draining, you feel like something is off at some point. Your interactions don't flow anymore. Your mind starts to go elsewhere. That might be a sign that you're an introvert, even though you're at that point not aware of it yet.
Mm.
One other thing is introverts generally don't like small talk. Like the co-working example, how was your weekend? How was yours? Like all of those things, it's just exchanging facts. So if you look at the content of the conversation, it's close to nothing. This is just about the energy that's exchanged and how you say things. I think for extroverts, like that works. Like this gives them a little boost of energy by just having this little interaction. But introverts are, I'm generalizing. They're more like, okay, what's the point of this?
Yeah, absolutely. And that what you mentioned is this feeling of as there is almost a limit in energy of how much, and I can relate to that so much when it comes to myself, is that the interactions, and I feel also the presence that you give to an interaction. If there are people around, you might be very present. So if you are very present to a conversation and it's not quote unquote going anywhere, it almost feels like I just literally use a lot of my energy to talk about my weekend. And that energy I can no longer use for, working on my book or doing something else that requires my mental space. It's almost like I can relate to that you're so aware of how much energy you have in a day, and you're trying to be intentional of where I'm going to spend that. So for that reason, for instance, for me as an introvert, and I'm curious to hear with you about it, moving into the virtual world has been absolutely fantastic for me, because being online and working online and having most of my speaking and coaching and training online, and as well as networking, allows me to recharge between. So you go online, you have an interaction, and then you can go into your own space and really recharge and do whatever you need to come back to yourself and then go into the next conversation. So can you relate to that did you enjoy when it became more remote and most things started to be more virtual?
Interestingly, no. I don't do any online networking events. I don't do video calls, like almost never. I do like the in-person events. I do like to meet people in person, go to a venue, feel the atmosphere, everything. So yeah, and online networking, I like there are benefits, but it just also doesn't give me the energy boost that in-person interactions give me. So I have more focused on finding ways to make in-person events and networking work for me.
Yeah, amazing. And this is the beauty of it, because when we talk about introvert, extrovert, there's a range in which it's not one or another. We have, it's almost like it's a scale on which scale you can see how you are, what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, and just basically learning about your energy levels and understanding more how you function and what makes you feel recharged and what makes you feel drained. So it's really I would say this podcast and live show episode is really more about exploring and questioning yourself about, okay, how do I feel as a leader? Do I feel that I'm drained in the end of the day, or does this feel like my energy throughout the day is going through? Which leads me to a question I would love to ask you, which is about the routines or the habits. If you look at the week or the day, are there some things that you do that helps you to better keep your energy and even re-energize yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. The main thing for me is alone time for reflection. Could be just reading a book or having lunch by myself. That is the number one thing that is on top of my priority list. And with that, daily routine becomes actually easy. Like if you just remember to schedule recharge time, at least for me, that is the total game changer. for networking events, obviously it's a little different, and you might not feel that your energy is drained after having spent a whole day networking, but you might feel something is off, like some interactions aren't flowing anymore. You're not picking up all the content anymore. So because you have some kind of adrenaline during the event, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
So for event days, I make sure I travel alone. I have my own accommodation to go to where I'm not forced to see anyone in the morning. And in the evening, like I just have my own space to go back to. And during the event itself, depending on duration, I will take 1 or 2 longer breaks where I just go by myself to have lunch or dinner at another place.
Amazing. Yeah. Great tips. And I know that you have a lot of great resources for introverted leaders. Is there any way that people could learn more from you? And as we've covered quite a lot already today in this podcast episode, I would love you to just share if you write, or I know that you're a speaker, I know that you're also writing a lot on these topics. Where can people discover more about your work?
So the best way would be introvertedleadership.com. That's where I collect all the resources. And there's also a downloadable guide for in-person networking events for introverts.
That's amazing. Amazing, Marcel. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. Thank you so much for sharing all these tips. For everyone who listened or watched this episode, please comment and feel into how you're feeling, if you can relate to this, or if you actually have, let's say, a partner or co-founder, or maybe even a team member that maybe is more of an introvert. It's always great to hear your insights. Marcel, is there some final words that you would like to share with our audience today?
Yeah, if I can add one more thing, is if you're an introvert and you don't have the network and the social or business life you want, you need to change something, because you're not going to wake up someday and have the skills to build that network. You actively need to change something, and for that you need to move out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Marcel. And we are going to share your links where people can find you. So as mentioned, introvertedleadership.com. We're also going to share some of Marcel's social media platforms. You can follow his amazing content as well. Thank you, Marcel, for coming on the show. It has been a true pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And for the ones listening, thank you for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.